I must have made many mistakes. Among them is I tried to appoint people who would take over from me, but from the very beginning, from the time when Musa Hitam was my deputy, I had problem. After they were appointed, they changed color. The same thing happened when I was thinking about Anwar succeeding me. Then he was too impatient, and he started going against me. So in the end, of course, he has some personal problem, and he was out of the party. But then I had to appoint Abdullah. Abdullah was not my supporter. He was supporting Tunku Razali when Razali was contesting against me. But I still gave him a chance. Unfortunately, the moment he took over, he threw out all my policies and devised his own. And in many instances, there were evidence of corruption. Of course, I thought that I did a good job getting rid of him to give it to Najib. But as you know, when Najib becomes a prime minister, he was worse than anybody else. So that is my regret. I don't seem to be able to choose the right people.
After some time into his retirement between 2003 and 2009, Dr. Mahathir began to criticize Tun Abdullah Badawi's leadership for short-sighted over the country's future economic development, flip-flop decisions and weak leadership. Tun Abdullah's decision to grant more APIs for importing foreign cars, damaging the National Car Project. Excellent performance in the 2004 11th general election inspired Tun Abdullah to move away from Mahathirism, neglecting the Vision 2020 while attempting to increase his Islamic leadership character. This decision frustrated Dr. Mahathir, but nothing more frustrated than looking at Tun Abdullah submitting his leadership to Singapore. The latter's decision to cancel the bridge project to replace the old Johor Causeway undermined the country's sovereignty. Dr. Mahathir said, by allowing Singaporeans to dictate terms, the current administration had effectively undermined the sovereignty of our country. I had a choice. I could remain tight-lipped and maintain my image of a respected elder statesman, or I could make myself heard again. I chose the latter. It was too much for me to see us submitting to Singapore. Dr. Mahathir's criticism over Tun Abdullah's weak leadership proved to be true with the poor performance of Barisan Nasional in the March 2008 12th general election. He could not hide his frustration anymore and openly asked Tun Abdullah to resign. To prove his concern over Tun Abdullah's poor leadership, Dr. Mahathir resigned from UMNO in May 2008. Dr. Mahathir's criticism was taken as a blessing for Najib to push Abdullah's resignation from within. Tun Abdullah finally stepped down in 2009 and Najib Razak took over the post. Dr. Mahathir was pleased with the result and returned to UMNO in April 2008. But he questioned, is this enough to save UMNO and the Barisan Nasional? What is clear is that we need a strong leader to guide us out of this quagmire, and unless radical measures are taken, the Barisan Nasional will not survive the next general election. From the problem-based perspective, Dr. Mahathir's concern over the country's leadership under Abdullah Badawi was considered as the main content of learning. The result of the 2008-12 general election was the problem trigger, or from the medical perspective, was the major symptom. To learn about the real sickness from the major symptom, Dr. Mahathir had to recall and diagnose Abdullah Badawi's performance in 2004 11th general election in comparison with his performance in the 2008-12 general election. Some of the most important guiding questions are: 1. How Abdullah managed to win the 2004 11th general election? 2. Why people voted for him? 3. What major changes Abdullah had brought to the country's direction afterwards? How were people reacted to the changes? And 5. Why then Abdullah failed to secure the two-third majority in the 2008 12th general election? Dr. Mahathir's thorough diagnostic process indicated that Barisan Nasional's outstanding performance in the 2004 11th general election was a clear message for Abdullah to bring the country further into the future based on existing country's vision, especially the Vision 2020. Therefore, people were expecting strong Abdullah's leadership, stronger than Mahathir. Unfortunately, Abdullah had understood the message differently. He thought the people were welcoming him as a new leader and expecting to see a different leadership, far different from Mahathir. People, Abdullah thought, had shown their disapproval of Mahathir's dictatorial leadership and expecting him to erase everything about Mahathirism. Therefore, instead of strengthening the leadership in line with Vision 2020, Abdullah chose to develop his own credentials as a new Malaysian Islamic civilizational leader. He neglected Dr. Mahathir's Vision 2020 but worked hard to promote his version of Islam called Islam Hadari. But his leadership direction was found to be going down the hill. As a person, he was fondly known as Mr. Nice Guy, but as a leader, he was a weak leader. For Dr. Mahathir, poor Barisan Nasional performance in the 2008 12th general election, which was the main symptom, proved Abdullah's weak leadership quality, which is the sickness that need to be cured. Therefore, to solve the problem and cure the sickness, according to Dr. Mahathir, Abdullah should resign from his post as the Prime Minister and the President of UMNO and be replaced with someone better than him. The problem triggered the result of 2008 12th general election. The diagnostic process, fact identification, poor Barisan Nasional performance. Ideas: 1. Far different from the 2004 11th general election, the worst in history. 2. Swing votes were huge. 3. Abdullah may have made many unwelcome changes after the 2004 general election. 4. People must have unexpected of what he did after 2004 general election. 5. There must be many reasons why Abdullah failed to secure a two-third majority in 2008 12th general election. Learning issues: 1. How Abdullah managed to win the 2004 11th general election. 2. Why were people voted for him? 3. What major changes Abdullah had brought to the country's direction afterwards? 4. How were people reacted to the changes? 5. Why then Abdullah failed to secure a two-third majority in the 2008 12th general election? Action plan: learn through 1. Barisan Nasional outstanding performance in the 2004 11th general election and the message people would like to send. 2. Abdullah leadership after the 2004 general election, his decision on existing Vision 2020 and other countries' major policies. 3. People reaction over his leadership and key performance index achieved. And 4. The 2008 12th general election post-mortem result and analysis. The result of learning: for Dr. Mahathir, poor Barisan Nasional performance in the 2008 12th general election proved Abdullah's weak leadership quality. It is the sickness and the main cause, and therefore, to solve the problem and cure the sickness, Abdullah should resign.
Kerana kesilapan oleh Datuk Abdullah, dianya gagal memenangi dengan baik dalam pilihan raya 2008. Dia kalah 5 buah negeri dan 1 wilayah. Dia punya majoriti sudah kurang, tidak lagi 2/3. Cuma lebih sikit saja, 140 berapa kan. Pasal kata orang dia tidur lama. Oleh kerana kegagalannya mengekalkan kemenangan yang besar bagi Barisan Nasional, maka dia terpaksa berhenti.
Dr. Mahathir's excessive efforts and aggressive approach to force Abdullah Badawi resignation could be interpreted negatively as undemocratic and unnecessary interference into the country's administration. By democratic rule, Dr. Mahathir's action should not be considered as valid. No one should ask Abdullah to resign since he was democratically elected by the people. But for Dr. Mahathir, any leader who had lost a great margin of support should consider resigning since that was a clear signal of weak leadership. Insisting to maintain his position will only damage the future prospect of the party and the nation's leadership. A highly principled leader would certainly choose to resign and make way for his successor, as Dr. Mahathir did before. Considering this point, we could not deny the fact that the only eligible person in Malaysia at that time to ask for Abdullah's resignation was Dr. Mahathir. One good leadership lesson from this problem was how a leader could develop his exceptional leadership quality based on the existing vision of his predecessors. It was true that as a successor, he should not be living under the shadow of his predecessor, but this reason did not justify him to neglect the existing shared vision of the nation. Malaysians under Dr. Mahathir's administration had already lived with the Vision 2020. They were looking at the future of the country through the lens of this vision. The mission towards this vision was already over 10 years on the road. Policies and projects were designed, planned and implemented during Dr. Mahathir's premiership. Despite some major challenges after the sacking of Anwar Ibrahim from UMNO and the cabinet, the momentum was already there. What Abdullah Badawi should do after taking over from Dr. Mahathir is to stick to the vision and steer further by enhancing it with some more significant efforts and initiative. Unfortunately, Abdullah Badawi had abandoned the vision and initiated his own vision, the Islam Hadari, the civilization of Islam.
That was the question asked by the first one. Vision 2020 was not achieved because for the last 15 years, the wrong strategy and policy were followed by the previous government, two governments. They did not focus on achieving Vision 2020, that is to say that Malaysia should become, by the year 2020, a developed country in our own definition. But because they haven't done that, now we cannot say by next year we would achieve Vision 2020. But in order that we progress so that eventually we would become a developed country, we are now introducing a new vision called shared prosperity, and this vision will be better than the Vision 2020 because everyone will enjoy prosperity.
The history of the crusades between the 11th and 13th centuries had recorded an abundance of leadership lessons on how a leader could develop his exceptional leadership quality based on the existing vision of his predecessors. One of the best examples was the story of Salahuddin Al-Ayyubi carrying the vision of his predecessor. He was a lieutenant to the Seljuk dynasty Sultan Nuruddin Zanki, ruled between 1146 to 1174. Nuruddin had sent him to Egypt in 1164 under his uncle's mission to free the Fatimid dynasty from the internal power struggle. Shirkuh, his uncle, managed to accomplish the mission and was appointed as the new vizier of Egypt. Unfortunately, after 2 months and 5 days in office, Shirkuh died. It was both the sad and happy moments for Salahuddin. He had lost his beloved uncle but was granted the leadership position. He was appointed by the Caliph as a new vizier in replacement of his uncle. Egypt had granted him the leadership position and power, but serving Nuruddin was his ultimate mission. Nuruddin's vision to free Jerusalem from the Crusaders was also his ultimate vision. Salahuddin had directed his leadership towards achieving Nuruddin's vision even after the latter died in 1174. When he had freed Jerusalem in 1187, he brought the pulpit or the mimbar crafted by Nuruddin's craftsmen from Aleppo, Syria, to be installed inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the city. It was a great symbolic gesture of how he valued and treasured Nuruddin's vision.
Dominated by the historic Dome of the Rock, the old city of Jerusalem is a holy place for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. For Muslims, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is a site of special reverence. It marks the place from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven, making it the third most holy site in Islam. The mosque has stood here for more than 1,000 years. For 800 of those years, the Imam preached the word of Allah at Friday prayers from the same spot, a minbar, similar to a pulpit in a Christian church. But this was no ordinary minbar. The Al-Aqsa minbar was known throughout Islam, and its fame went far beyond, attracting attention from experts and academics all over the world.
Now, all minbars are sacred objects, sacred to the word of Allah, but this one has a very, very particular significance for two reasons. One, it's a magnificent example of Islamic art from the heyday of Islamic art in the 12th century, and secondly, because it has a really remarkable history.
The story of the Al-Aqsa minbar is rooted in the Crusades. During the Middle Ages, roughly around the time that Britain was experiencing the Norman conquest, the eastern end of the Mediterranean, particularly that part known as the Levant, seemed to be a permanent battlefield. In this narrow strip of land, Christian Europe fought Arabs, Turks, and Kurds for control of what each regarded as its holy places.
The low point, from the Muslim point of view, came with the brutal taking of Jerusalem by the Christian Crusaders in 1099. It was a merciless rout and absolutely ruthless, and it looked as though the grip of the Christians on Jerusalem was unassailable. From then on, the entire Muslim focus was on getting Jerusalem back from the Christians, from the Europeans.
It took nearly 100 years, but so certain were the Islamic leaders of success that in 1168, the warrior leader, the Seljuk Sultan Nur al-Din, commissioned a fine minbar to be made in Aleppo in preparation for the triumphal return to Jerusalem.
This particular minbar was one of the most richly decorated pieces of sacred art, of Islamic art, ever conceived. And it was designed and made at the zenith of Islamic culture in the 12th century by the very finest craftsmen that could be found anywhere.
In 1187, Nur al-Din's successor, the great Kurdish warrior Saladin, finally triumphed over the Christian Crusaders and took back Jerusalem for Islam. One of his first acts was to rededicate the Al-Aqsa Mosque and to install within it the celebratory minbar. From then onwards, it became known as the Minbar of Saladin, playing its part in the life of the mosque for the next 800 years, an enduring symbol of the Muslim triumph.
The story of Salahuddin and Nuruddin is a story of a visionary leadership. As a successor, a leader should lead through the shared vision of the predecessor and the people, not to focus on developing personal credentials. Leaders who work hard to achieve the shared vision of his predecessor and the people would not only easily be forgotten. Instead, if he managed to accomplish the vision, he would be better known in history compared to his predecessor who initiated the vision. His credential would also be much better than his predecessor. This is what Salahuddin had accomplished. Up to this day, Salahuddin is far well known to the world as compared to Nuruddin. The moral of the story: work hard on the vision. Your credential will thereafter develop along the way. But if you are so busy to develop your own credential by neglecting the vision, then people will only know you by the name, not your leadership achievement and quality.